Just over a week into his second term, President Trump signed an order for the Space Force to come up with a missile defense system dubbed Iron Dome for America, inspired by Israel's well-used and effective air defense system. Towards the end of last month, Trump announced the selection of a design for the system, which had now been transmuted into the Golden Dome, because of course it had. And on its face, it's a hugely ambitious project, the implementation of which would change the nature of global warfighting, deterrence and defence. Some people say it will make America safe from a rapidly changing threat landscape. Others say that, on the contrary, it will make that world a great deal more dangerous. And still others say it doesn't matter what any of those others say, because it won't work anyway. So, let's discuss. The Golden Dome is supposed to be a comprehensive shield against any foreign aerial attack against the United States of America, described as a multi-layer system intended to detect and destroy threats that are various stages from preemptive strikes, hitting missiles before they've even been fired, in other words, to intercepting them in the air as they are closing in on their intended target. Now, of course, we know that this can work because we've seen it working with that very impressive Iron Dome system used by Israel to intercept the rockets fired at it from Hamas and Hezbollah. Except it might cross your mind that the United States of America is quite a bit bigger than Israel. And it might also cross your mind that a bunch of rockets put together by the various proxies of Iran, well, there might be some substantive difference between intercepting those short-range conventional ballistic weapons and hypersonic long-range nuclear weapons. Such weapons travel 100 times further distance, 7 times faster than the rockets that the Iron Dome has to cope with. And of course, you would be right about those things. Hence why Trump's Golden Dome would require hundreds or thousands of satellites equipped with sensors and space-based interceptors. The initial estimated cost of the system is $175 billion. Well, when it comes to such big, ambitious projects, we're all rather used to final costs being, 4-5 times the initial estimates or more? And Trump announced that the system would be operable before he leaves office, January 2029, assuming he leaves office. Again, major complex problems routinely run extremely late, even the ones that don't have unfeasibly short deadlines attached to them to begin with. So I would be willing to suggest that deadline will not be met. And that's assuming that the system's even feasible. Numerous scientists and defence experts have expressed scepticism, saying that it's technically impossible, or a fantasy, or science fiction. One critic said that hitting fast-moving, non-emitting targets in space would be like trying to hit a speeding bullet with a bullet in the dark. It would require a dense constellation of satellites, far exceeding even the currently overabundant Starlink network. And even if you put all of that in place, there'd probably be easier and cheaper countermeasures an adversary could take that would defeat it anyway. A point that you'd have to say was rather driven home recently by Ukraine's bold attack against Russian airfields, where multiple cheap drones were transported undercover by lorries to close proximity to targets and then unleashed in a coordinated attack. Just imagine. You've invested probably the best part of $1 trillion in your fancy system, pushing your nation even further into debt in the process. And then some low-budget adversaries with a few trucks and drones render it all completely useless. Such practical concerns are no barrier, of course, because luckily the United States has a president who doesn't read critiques, and between Fox News and the horde of loyal yes-men he's surrounded himself with, nobody's likely to dare to explain to him that there are conceptual difficulties with his golden dream. If you're an adversary of the United States, however, you can't afford to depend on that. America's rivals, China and Russia, see the goal of being able to neutralize their nuclear arsenals, and they immediately assume that this is really about America seeking a first strike advantage, because it would give them the ability to launch nuclear weapons preemptively, to take out an adversary knowing that any retaliation they sent out would be intercepted. Now, of course, the consequences to the livability on the planet, if you deliver a major nuclear strike even halfway round the world, that would be horrendous. And the likelihood you'd successfully keep out all of the incoming nukes would be low enough to mean that you should expect to be partly obliterated yourself. Because Israel's Iron Dome is considered highly effective, but it only has a 90% success rate, which isn't enough if there are nuclear bombs coming at you. So you'd have to have a crazy person elected as President of the United States for them to think that that was a smart thing to do. One who so crazy that they would ignore scientific advice about nuclear winters and the likelihoods of success. And yes, there is a non-zero chance that the United States did indeed elect a crazy person. But to be fair, he is by and large not crazy in that way. I mean, ignoring scientific advice, yes, but scared of nuclear war by all accounts, also yes. But of course, once you've proven that crazy can be elected, you have to bear in mind that the next flavour of crazy may be different. So America's rivals, and indeed a number of its former allies, have been expressing large degrees of concern. So China, which has been busy building its armed forces to be a match for those of the United States, said that the plans would turn space into a war zone, and that it would violate the principle of the peaceful use of space enshrined in the Outer Space Treaty. Now, I would suggest it's unlikely this argument did anything save than to alert Trump to the fact that there remains at least one treaty he hasn't yet unilaterally ripped up. Russia also said that the project, quote, undermines the foundations of strategic stability. Although, to be fair, so does invading your neighbours. North Korea, also not a fan. Now, Canada is an interesting case study. Given the geography and the likely attack vectors of incoming to the United States, it's been noted you couldn't really build the Golden Dome to work effectively without Canada. Canada hasn't ruled out being involved, but Trump, being Trump, then immediately said that Canada could have the protection of the Golden Dome itself for free, so long as they agreed to become the 51st state of the United States. Otherwise, he said it would cost them, I think it was something like $61 billion. Now, if I were Mark Carney, I'd be saying, well, that's fine. We don't expect Russia or China's going to be targeting us with weapons. But if you want our participation, because without it your system's not going to work, then you're going to have to give us, well, say, $61 billion. Sounds all right. There might be reasons why you wouldn't play that card if you were Mark Carney, but that's what I would be tempted to do. The people who have no problem whatsoever with this project are all the big tech bros salivating at the prospect of huge contracts to build different parts of it. Silicon Valley oligarchs and arms manufacturers don't really care if the system turns out to be that useful or not, so long as they cream off the hundreds of billions that will go into trying to make it work. Elon Musk's SpaceX was expected to be a big beneficiary. If anyone can do what they would have been doing, I expect that those other people will get it instead, given recent events. But then, since SpaceX is the world leader in filling the sky with unfeasibly large numbers of satellites, they might well survive as a participant. Palantir, Anduril, L3Harris, Lockheed Martin, RTX Corp. They all officially think it's the best idea ever, and President Trump is truly a visionary genius for promoting it. And all this is something to bear in mind as US senators fight and argue over Trump's budget bill that's currently before them, promising to raise the overall US deficit by trillions of dollars as it does. It only includes an initial $25 billion investment toward the Golden Dome. All of the rest of the cost will follow. And if Trump's serious about getting it operational before the end of his term, it's going to have to follow pretty quickly. So that's the project in a nutshell. And you might say, why not? I mean, apart from the fact that it would stoke nuclear proliferation across the world, fueling a new chapter in the arms race to focus on countermeasures and equivalent systems. And I suppose apart from the fact that it would weaponise outer space and lead to dangerous innovations that make us less space. I mean, space lasers, anybody? And I suppose apart from the fact that it's probably technologically impossible anyway, even on its own terms. And of course, apart from the fact that the cost of it would accelerate the bankrupting of America for arguably no real military or strategic purpose. But apart from those things, it's hard to think of a single reason not to do it. I mean, no reason that anyone would dare say out loud to the President of the United States, anyway.